Good morning. Look at, here I am. I'm here. Oh my gosh, I didn't even put any makeup on this morning. It's falling apart, early birds. It's falling apart. I really was going to put some makeup on and then I forgot. I've been running around so bothered by the fact that I don't have any of my scarves. Okay, so that's what you need to do. Now we need to keep moving over here because we haven't been moving past this. I talked to you about Alfred Adler. I talked to you about, the last where we left off was assimilating information, right? How you end up talking, which is basically teaching. A podcast should be about teaching, right? If we are producing a podcast, the podcast is for information. Well, then what we should be doing is teaching. So you teach those things that are a part of you, right? As I said in the last point there, when we assimilate information, that information becomes a part of who we are, right? And so when we have that information as a part of who we are, it becomes second, we call it kind of like second nature, early birds. It becomes automatic. Now, I said that I was going to do a short story, right? And what this book report here is, we've already talked about the book report, and the biggest thing about this, right, we've talked about the story map, the setting, the plot, right? And when you're doing a book report, you don't tell anything that would give away the ending, for example. So the thing about writing a book report really is, how do you organize the information, right? And it's no different than how will you organize your podcast. It's the reason why I always use PowerPoints in my podcast. It's because it helps me organize the information. When we were in class 172, what we did was we talked about here, seriously? This is getting me so upset. We talked about different, the third point there, different viewpoints of the author helps us understand only what the author wants. It's the same thing when we do a book report. We want people to understand the book without necessarily giving it away. Why do we write a book report? We write a book report so that people get interested in reading a book. But if you told them the whole story, they're not going to be interested in reading that book, right? So part of writing always is, part of a podcast always is thinking about how you're going to unfold that information. Just like I said, you don't tell them, and then Granny got ate by a wolf. You're like, who's Granny? Where'd the wolf come from? And where's the Department of Natural Resources? What's going on here? Is this another government conspiracy against grandmothers? I don't understand. We have to organize our things. We have to organize our thoughts, right? And part of that organization is looking at different viewpoints of the author to help us understand what the author wants us to understand. Now, there are these different points of view from the author. I want to share this with you actually using a different slide. And that is this slide here. So when we are writing a story, as we said, we have the beginning, we have the middle, and we have the end. And in the beginning of these stories, what do? We start with an introduction. So here's our story map of definitions, okay? That's what I'm looking at here. So we've already gone through these definitions of the plot, the characters, the setting, and now I want to talk about how the author decides to unfold the information, the same way I do it here. We have got a first person narrative. So when you're telling a story, when you're reading a story, when you're doing a book report, you want to think about where the author is coming from. Is the author the writer in the story? Is the author using I, like I am in the podcast? Podcasts are done in first person. I'm telling my own story. I'm teaching this from my own point of view, which is the reason why I use the word I all the time. That's our first person. Telling a story from the point of view of the first person is telling a story that is his or her own story, okay? So let's take a look at that from this slide over here. First person uses I and sometimes we. They are telling the story from his or her own perspective. There is a second person, which I didn't put on the other slide because sometimes people talk about second person, sometimes they don't. We use second person when we use the word you. You need to use wood glue when you're gluing together your nightlight. You will then need to decorate your nightlight. You will then need to paint it and put on Mod Podge. That's the second person narrative. If you're telling a story, you're narrating the story, no matter what. If you're telling a story, a book is telling a story. Those people really aren't saying those words, right? It's on paper. It's a story. So from what point of view is the author telling his or her story? Are they using I, first person? Are they using you, second person? And those are usually instructional videos. I sometimes use second person, don't I? You will need to. You need to read. Why don't you write a story and do something with your lives? No, I'm kidding. Okay, so that is the second person that we write from. The third person uses she or he. And there are 3 different types of narrating from the third person. 3 different types of narrations from the third person. Let's look at it from here. Third person limited. That is telling only part of the story. It's using the story is told from one person's point of view. One person's point of view, another person, a third person, not me, some other person. That person is telling the story, and that person only has a limited viewpoint. I don't know if I tell a story what another person really thought. I haven't seen any evidence of it, but I don't know. I have a limited point of view. That's third person limited. I might tell a story from a third person limited point of view. I might tell a story from a third person objective narrator. This is a person who's involved in the story and tells the story as it unfolds. So this person, objective character, objective means I can tell you the facts. I know more than just a single character in the story. Third person limited. Objective means I can tell you some background and some facts. Third person omniscient. Omniscient means what? All-knowing. We know that from Almighty Tuesdays. All-knowing is omniscient. And so that person knows everything. That person can get into the mind of every single character. If you're one character, third person limited, you can't know what other characters are thinking. So these are things that we think about when we are deciding to write a story or a podcast or whatever we are communicating to somebody else, but especially when we're communicating on paper. Okay. And then there's the middle of the story. It gains momentum as events unfold and leads to the climax of the story or the main event that demonstrates a problem or challenge that needs to be resolved. And then the end of our story is the resolution, the conclusion of that problem. Excellent, early birds. You know what? We're going to keep going. And the reason why we're going to keep going, of course, is because we made a mess of the first half of this classroom. So we need to keep going just a little bit more. So there is our first person, second person, and then third person, limited, objective, and omniscient. All right? Excellent. Now, did you write your story? I'm going to end early birds with my story. I told you it was a short story, but nevertheless, I did write a story. And you might want to think about what was the beginning? What was the problem, right? What's the title of the story? I forgot to put the title of the story up there. I should have put that title. The title is, and I do have it. Oh, there it is. Writing Heartstrings. That's what it's called. Oh my gosh. After all of that, it's called Writing Heartstrings. Let me put that one up there. Because I did do a story map, but I didn't put, I want to show you how I did this because I did not put in there my beginning, middle, and end. And the reason why I didn't do that was because when I started writing the story, we don't normally start a story by filling this out, right? Early birds, we don't start a story by filling this out. We have an idea and we just jump in. That's what I did. So I wanted to fill some of this out for you. That's the reason why I put the title up there. And I wanted to think about a title. So Writing Heartstrings is what I called this. And so there are my characters. There's my setting. But I thought of the story before I was able to put any of that in there. So sometimes we just start writing and then we fill in the rest of it to make sure that our story makes sense, to make sure that our story has a plot, to make sure our story has a resolution, right? To make sure our story is going somewhere and telling somebody something. Okay, so here's my story. Writing Heartstrings. I remember the day that I decided to become a journalist. It wasn't some big event like September 11th that I almost got on video but didn't and wished I had. No, it's another story about a teacher I'll never forget. Her name was Miss Alice, but it's probably not what you're thinking. She was such a great writer and I learned so much from her, I decided to become a journalist. No, it's not like that at all. I'll get to the story. It was a time, if you were paying attention to journalists, as journalists do, we started calling teachers by their first names. Not so much because it was good for classroom relationships, making teachers appear more friendly, but more so because students shouldn't have such information about teachers like their last names. It was a time just prior to rampant distrust that came with too many fixed elections. The public was divided and knowledge was power. Education was getting defunded and teachers were left unsupported. But back to my story. Miss Alice was taking her students to use the story, teaching her students. Miss Alice was asking her students to use the story map to write a short story, much the same as I am asking you to write today. It's been a long time since I thought of Miss Alice, but I started thinking about how year after year I stopped writing. Journalism didn't pay what it used to, and no one wanted to hear anything of the truth, so I stopped writing. Sometimes when I think about it like I am now, it makes me teary-eyed. There's such a heaviness in my heart about all the reasons I stopped writing, but mostly because no one was listening. Anyway, back to my story. I was in third grade and we lived in a small town in Michigan. It was spring. I was staring out the window as usual, daydreaming about summer vacation. Not so much because we went anywhere or did much of anything, but our cousins came to visit from Chicago for the summer. Our parents paid less attention to us. The house was full and we laughed a lot. We fought a lot too. Time blesses me, it seems, with only good memories. During the summer, there was old-fashioned days. People would get dressed up like it was the 1800s and stand in the store windows on display. The 5 and dime had old-fashioned prices like candy for a dime. It should have been a penny, but the merchants weren't that old-fashioned. So as I was saying, Miss Alice assigned us a story to write after a lesson on writing using the story map. It really took me a long time to think of a topic, as I recall, and I felt a lot of pressure to not simply fill in the story map, but to write something that I thought Miss Alice would really like and possibly read to the rest of the class. I thought of the genre I wanted to write about. I thought maybe fantasy, but I never really liked those stories about the mystical. They always started out in one direction with you thinking everything was wonderful, and the next thing you knew, the wolf ate Granny or the baby deer was shot by hunters. Fantasy and folklore just weren't for me. If I was going to worry about something, it better be for something that it better be something for real that making I can do something about. That clearly needs to be edited. See, we need to edit. So I was thinking long and hard about what to write. It took me the whole weekend when it struck me, and like a dam that broke free, I wrote the story in what seemed like 30 minutes. Likely I worked on it for a few hours, but what I remember is that the idea struck like lightning, and from there it was a breeze. That's what I remember. I must be a writer. It came so easily. That, and Miss Alice never wrote a story. She showed us how to use the story map and encouraged us to be creative. She promised she would try to think of a story to write. It would be fun, but she didn't. I remember how disappointed I was. I thought we might learn something interesting about her, or some special trick that she might show us that would make us genius writers. But she never gave us an example of her own story. As a kid, I kind of thought it was a cop-out. Don't get me wrong, I still liked Miss Alice. I turned in my homework on time as I always had. In fact, I probably made more of an effort knowing that someday, if I didn't, I might be just like Miss Alice, teaching students yet never doing, talking and never showing, lecturing without ever knowing the wisdom of being an example. I decided to give writing my best effort. Miss Alice read my story in front of the class, and that's when I decided to become a journalist. That's my story! What do you think? It was just a very short story, wasn't it? But I did it exactly like I said. It came bursting like a dam. Do you think my story is a true story? Do you think it's a true story? And then how much of the story do you believe is true? 10%? 25, 50, 75%? 90% of my story? Do you think, how much of my story do you think is true? That's all I have for you today. I know she's smiling like she's got something she knows. I do know something. I know I'm excited about this part of our lesson, early birds. And let me just say something to you about all of this. Can you see how different my attitude can be when I'm talking about crime and things that are negative and things that are harmful to people? And when I talk about teaching, and when I talk about growth, and when I talk about integrity, and when I talk about creating, do you see, early birds, the difference in my attitude? This is one of the reasons why I decided to be a positive psychologist. It's because I know how important a good attitude is. I also know that I will have a tendency to become critical of things that are around me, to notice the negative things and talk about their injustices. And I know that what that does to my attitude is it gives me a poor attitude. And so what I always want to keep coming back to are my early birds, is my bookless classroom, is my engaging. Am I engaging people, or am I just simply complaining, right? That is the conviction. For me, it's the conviction. Is what I'm sharing with you healthy? Is it making you healthier, or is it making you more angry? I am a person who has always stood up for justice. Since I was a little girl, I told you this at the beginning of our classrooms. I was always outspoken. If given a choice, which I thought in my head, should I say it or not say it? Chances are I'm gonna say it. So I always want to be careful, knowing that I have my eyes focused on injustices. I want to be careful to make sure that I am still giving you the best of my positive attitude. This is Dr. Annette Feravich, where we pulled it together. I had to kind of pull it out of my you-know-what, but even though I did pull it out of my you-know-what, I did pull it out. We pulled it together. This is day number 175 in the classroom, where I am the teacher bringing you a healthier mind, a healthier body, and a healthier spirit, no matter what they have to say about me. Thanks for joining me.